Yo. And the topic of this video is going to be about Buddhism. This is like going to be like so interesting because, you know, like Buddhism, like the topic of this video is going to be about like Buddhism. I really wanted to like now sort of like talk about Buddhism because I do believe that Buddhism's like people like it's like so like influential, Buddhism, in regards to like world history. I do believe that Buddhism, other than like the Abrahamic religions, the Abrahamic faith like Islam, Christianity, Islam, Judaism and stuff, other than these types of religions, the other like big world religions would be Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism, like these religions from India. Instead of like these types of religions from like the Middle East, Arabia and stuff like that, and like Levant, like Israel, you know, because the Abrahamic faith, they kind of come from like they come from like that sort of territory in the Middle East. These like types of the other like most big like influential religions would be like Buddhism, Hinduism and Sikhism. These other like very big world religions. These like religions, specifically Buddhism is what I'm going to talk about now. Buddhism is like so interesting. I do believe, in my opinion, that Buddhism is not really even like, it should not even be considered like a religion, Buddhism, because Buddhism, like Buddhists, like the Buddha didn't like tell you to pray to any specific deity, did he? What deity do the Buddhists pray to? I know that there's like a lot of variation in Buddhism and stuff. There's like so many different branches and so many different types of Buddhism and stuff. I do know like that some like branches of Buddhism, they might become intertwined and tangled up with like some branches of Hinduism and stuff like that. But I do believe that like Buddhism should not, in my opinion, I don't even believe that it should technically even be considered like a world religion, because like what deity do the Buddhists pray to and stuff like that? What deity do they worship and pray to and stuff? I don't believe the Buddhists pray to any specific deity at all, do they? What God do the Buddhists pray to? Obviously, I know that Buddhism's like there was a lot of variation in Buddhism, and there like could be some types of Buddhism where the Buddhists like they pray to like some, maybe the Hindu gods like Krishna or some Hindu deities, I don't know. But for the most part, I do believe that Buddhism, the Buddhists, I don't believe they pray to any specific deities. I don't believe the Buddhists pray to any specific deities at all, do they? I know that again there's like a ton of like variation in Buddhism and stuff. There's so many different types of Buddhism and stuff, the Buddhists. But for the most part, look at that clear blue sky, man. It fucking does my head in. Looking like when I get outside and stuff, I just look at the blue sky, man. It fucking it kind of just puts me in like such a calm state of mind and stuff. It makes me feel so at peace. Again, I'm telling you, if you've been in all day, you should not be in all day and stuff. You should definitely get out and get some fresh air. I'm telling you, if you watch my videos, being in all day, it's gonna ruin your it's gonna literally ruin your brain. It's gonna ruin your mental health. It's gonna rot your brain, your mental health away. Seeing the blue skies, man, it feels great. Anyway, Buddhism. Topic of this video is Buddhism. Buddhism, in my opinion, should not even technically be considered a religion, because what God do the Buddhists pray to? What deities do the Buddhists pray to and stuff? Anyway, what is Buddhism? Buddhism, it kind of links to Buddha. It's kind of in the name Buddhism. It kind of follows from Buddha and stuff like that. Buddhism kind of relates to some person called the Buddha. Buddhism is kind of like a play on words. Buddhism it kind of like takes after itself from like Buddha, like this person called Buddha Siddhartha Gautama. Buddha was like just an honorific title. His actual name was like, I do believe it could have been like Siddhartha Gautama. I don't know. Buddhism, like Buddhism, it comes after like Buddha, aka Siddhartha Gautama. It comes after him. This guy, Buddhism it does kind of revolve around this guy called Buddha or Siddhartha Gautama, and this guy was quite interesting. Siddhartha Gautama. And there's like, you can go onto like the internet, you can go on like more like detailed like biographies of him and stuff. People like, there's so many other types of like YouTube videos you can click onto and stuff. I do recommend you like find some type of YouTube channel called, I don't know if it was called Biographics. It's by that bold guy, that bold British guy and stuff. He does like a pretty good job at like making like biographies on like very famous people throughout our history. I'll link his like this guy biographics, like one of the biographies he did on the Buddha. I'll see if I can find it. If I can find it, I'll put it in like the video description comment section. Anyway, Buddhism kind of it comes from like Buddha Siddhartha Gautama. Buddha comes from like Buddhism comes from Buddha, aka Siddhartha Gautama, and Buddhism is like such a again, I do not believe that Buddhism should even technically be considered like a religion, in the sense that like what deity do the Buddhists pray to? The Buddhists, they don't pray to any specific like deities or gods or whatever and stuff. They're pretty much, Buddhism's like, you can also see like Buddhism as being like sort of atheistic, in the sense that the Buddhists, they don't really like they don't really even like specify like which specific deity they pray to and stuff like that and whatever. They don't like pray to, I don't believe the Buddhists pray to any particular deity. But anyway, Buddhism, in my opinion, technically it should not even be considered a religion. I do believe Buddhism should be seen more as like a philosophy anyway. But you know, Buddha, it comes from like the word Buddhism. Like, let's talk about etymology. Buddhism, the word itself, it relates to like Buddha, this type of title. Even Buddha, like that's not even like the guy's name. The guy's name was Siddhartha Gautama. Anyway, he was like an Indian guy born in Nepal, I do believe. So I might be like kind of a little bit wrong on that. You can go on like Wikipedia and stuff and try and like prove me wrong, correct all the mistakes I might be making in this video. Anyway, born in Nepal, Siddhartha Gautama. Because why am I talking about Siddhartha Gautama, this guy called Siddhartha Gautama? Because you know, Buddhism comes from Buddha, aka Buddha was, who was Buddha? Buddha was this guy. Buddha wasn't even like this guy's actual name. Buddha is like, it's like a title, just like, you know, like Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was not like the guy, that Mongolian guy's name, that famous, very famous world conqueror, that famous Mongolian guy that conquered the world. That's not his actual name. Genghis Khan is not his name. His name was Temujin. Genghis Khan is like sort of like a title, and Khan itself is like a title. In the same way, like Buddha, it's not like the guy's name. Buddha, like, it's just a title. His actual name was Siddhartha Gautama. I do believe so. I might be wrong. You can double. I'm gonna link like that guy's the biographics like I'm gonna link some type of documentary for you to watch in like the video description comment section. Anyway, regardless, like Buddhism comes from Buddha. This guy, there was a person called Buddha that lived like, that was like born in India, somewhere in India, and maybe in Nepal. And anyway, he was like a very because Buddhism, it comes from this guy called Buddha, or Buddha Siddhartha Gautama. Anyway, it comes from this guy, and this guy's like very interesting. It's like he was like a very interesting person. Such an interesting person. He was like I do believe he was like kind of like a prince. He was sort of like a prince. He was like a prince, and he was kind of like sheltered away, and his parents were like royalty and stuff, and he had like all this privilege going for him and stuff, and he had like all of these like high positions that he was like at the top of his society. I do believe so. I do believe the Buddha was like born privileged. I do believe so. I do believe he was like some type of prince, and his parents were like royalty. They were like at the top of their society anyway, and he was kind of like very privileged, and he was like kind of sheltered away. And so, and really, this guy Buddha is kind of very interesting. He was like he was like a a guy from India, Nepal. You can kind of picture like what he would look like. He was like kind of like a typical Indian guy. I do believe so. Maybe he might have been like a little bit different. Maybe the Buddha, because I do believe that wasn't he from the Shakya clan? I don't know why his specific clan name, his tribe. I don't know. There is like some rumors going around that he came from like some of his ancestors might have came into India from Central Asia, so he could have looked a little bit more different from a typical Indian guy. Maybe he might have been like more like Central Asian looking, sort of like an Afghan guy. I don't know, or an Iranian person. I don't know. But it's kind of like all of that speculation. But we do know for sure that he was born somewhere around India, somewhere in India and stuff. And he was born like probably in Nepal and stuff. And he was like sort of like a prince, and he was like he was born into like a very privileged position and stuff. Anyway, and he was like a typical guy doing his typical things like eating, shitting, sleeping, interacting with his like parents and family and stuff. Sort of like he was sort of like a typical guy, like this, like how you and me, like we interact with our parents, our family and stuff. In that same type of way, the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama, he was like a typical guy who was interacting with his family, his parents and stuff and whatever and stuff. Really, yeah, he was like a very typical guy. But as he like matured and stuff, as he got a little bit older, he started to like venture out of his like comfort zone, out of his like sheltered like life that his parents provided for him. Because he was like, I do believe he was like sort of like a prince. I do believe he was like born into like a very privileged position. He was like sort of like royalty. Like in the Ottoman Empire, you had like the Ottoman sultans, these like these princes, like people that are like at the top of their society, and they were kind of like privileged, and they have like all of these like all of the comforts around them. He was like Siddhartha Gautama. He was sort of like a king. I do believe he was a king. Wasn't he? Maybe he might not be a king, like a prince, sort of like that type of figure role and stuff, whatever. Siddhartha Gautama. Anyway, he was like born into like such a privileged life and stuff. Very privileged. His parents provided for him immensely, and he was like kind of sheltered away from all like the troubles of his society and stuff. But inevitably, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he started to like get older and older and older and started to mature, and he started started to like get out of his comfort zone. He started to like travel around India, and he was just like looking at all the issues with India and stuff. He's looking at all the problems with India and stuff, all the starving people and all like the people that are suffering from disease and illness and sickness, all these types of shit, all these issues. And it got to like the Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha's head and stuff, and he's really contemplating on these issues, and he was trying to figure out like why is there like so much suffering and stuff, where's all these problems coming from and stuff. It's kind of like very interesting to think about it. And Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Damn, it's getting so like fucking sunny, man. My GoPro Hero 9's probably gonna overheat so quickly soon. Anyway, Siddhartha Gautama, born like, again, he was like he was a person born in India, in Nepal and stuff like that. He had like such a privileged life. He sort of was like born into like a very privileged position and stuff like that. He was sort of like born into like a very privileged position. Siddhartha Gautama, anyway, he born into like India, Nepal, somewhere like around that area. He was like very privileged. He had a lot going for him and stuff. And but the issue is that he was like sort of getting older. He was getting kind of a little bit older and stuff like that. He was getting a little bit older and stuff. He was getting a little bit older, and inevitably he was starting to like venture out of his like comfort zone. And he was like traveling around India and stuff. He was seeing like all these sick people and all these people with these health problems and disabilities and issues and stuff like that. And he was really starting to contemplate on these types of issues, all these like societal issues, societal problems and etc. and stuff. And he was really wondering to himself like where's all this type of suffering coming from? Where do all of these issues come from? And he was meditating on these issues and contemplating on them and stuff. He was meditating on these issues and he was contemplating on them, and he was trying to like really work out like, okay, where are all of these types of issues and problems coming from? And he was like really deeply like meditating and contemplating on these types of issues. And I do believe there was like a tale. He was like, you know, like those trees right around there. He was like, I do believe that like in some part of his life, at some point in his life, he sat down near a tree. Was it a lotus tree or something, some type of tree? And then he was like closing his eyes and he was just meditating, contemplating. And then it hit him. He actually experienced some type of enlightenment, and he realized that. My memory is very, very rusty on Buddhism. I do believe that the Buddhists, they believe that like attachment and stuff like this, attachment to the material world and stuff, that's what causes all these types of sufferings and problems for the human being. Like when we become way too attached, we become too materialistic and stuff like that, and we become like too concerned with like the material world. That's when we start to suffer. And the Buddha, he was like kind of under like a lotus tree, and he was like really meditating, contemplating. And enlightenment, he became enlightened after a while, after like a very long period of meditation, which is it's very interesting, because, you know, the Buddha, he was like sitting down behind like a lotus tree, and he was meditating, contemplating. So too, you know, like the Prophet Muhammad was like meditating, contemplating. The Prophet Muhammad, he was like in the cave of Hira. The Prophet Muhammad was in the cave of Hira, and he was like kind of like in this cave. He was like on the outskirts of Arabia, and he was like inside of this cave thing, and he was like contemplating and meditating, and he was like sitting down and like very like meditating, contemplating. Then he got like the divine revelation from Allah, supposedly. In that, you can draw like this type of parallel, so interesting, between the Prophet Muhammad and Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Obviously, I'm not saying that they're exactly the same type of people, but you know, it's very interesting. Both of them were like because, you know, Prophet Muhammad, he was like seeing like all these types of issues in his like society as well in Arabia, and Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he was seeing all these types of issues and problems in India. Muhammad in Arabia and Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, in India. It's so interesting. These very like religious people and stuff. These very famous religious people that are honored and like worshipped all around the world. Well, I don't know if the Buddha is worshipped. I don't know if Muhammad is worshipped. Definitely, maybe I'm being maybe I'm just gonna like start a lot of controversy, because, you know, I do believe that, you know, Muslims, you only worship like one God, Allah, not Muhammad, the Prophet. Even that's why the Prophet Muhammad, he didn't like let any type of images made of him, because he only wanted his like people to like follow like and worship Allah, the true God, not him. He didn't want it to be turned into an idol. Anyway, but, you know, Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, you can draw like this parallel between the Prophet Muhammad and like Siddhartha Gautama and stuff, and like the Buddha, because, you know, like Muhammad, he was like, I do believe he was like born in the Quraysh tribe, and he was like so like privileged and stuff like that. And he was like, was he privileged? I don't know. Maybe he was like a more typical guy. I don't know. I do know the Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, was privileged a little bit. He was like a prince. Anyway, both of these guys, they both like they experienced enlightenment and stuff. They were given some type of divine wisdom and stuff after they were like deeply contemplating and meditating over their society's problems. I do believe that the Prophet Muhammad, he was like in the cave of Hira, and he was like thinking about like, well, what's going on in Arabia and stuff. He's like contemplating on like all these important existential issues. That's so interesting, because Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he was like behind a lotus tree and he was like sitting down and he was contemplating, meditating in that same type of way. The Prophet Muhammad was also in like the cave of Hira. Not really, he wasn't like behind a tree. It's not exactly the same, but he was like the similar like thing here is that that both the Siddhartha Gautama and the Prophet Muhammad, they were like meditating and contemplating on like all these types of important existential issues. That's so like interesting, isn't it? You can draw like this parallel between Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and the Prophet Muhammad, because they were both, Prophet Muhammad in Arabia, he was like on the outskirts of Arabia in the cave of Hira, meditating, contemplating, and he got like this divine wisdom, this type of revelation from like Allah supposedly. And you know, the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he was in India behind a lotus tree sitting down. He was like contemplating, meditating on all these societal problems in like India and stuff, and he got this divine revelation. Not a divine revelation, but he got like some type of enlightenment, some type of divine wisdom, not revelation, because I know obviously the Buddhists and stuff like that, they don't really believe in any type of deity, but like the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, I don't know, I just want to like kind of mention that Siddhartha Gautama and the Buddha, you can draw like this parallel between Siddhartha Gautama and the Buddha and the Prophet Muhammad, because Siddhartha Gautama, you know, again, he was like sort of like a prince, he was like very privileged and stuff, born into like a very like privileged position. He was like at the top of his society. I do believe so. I do believe his parents were like very like, they were royals, nobles and stuff. Siddhartha Gautama, he was like very privileged and etc and stuff, and he was like comforted and stuff, and he was like kind of sheltered away from all of these issues around it that are plaguing his society. And you know, as he matured and got older, he started to like venture out of his comfort zone. He started to like contemplate on all these issues and problems of his society, and he like kind of like he started to sit down like behind like a lotus tree, and he started to like meditate and stuff. And he contemplated, and he got like some type of enlightenment after a while. I do believe it's so interesting to draw like that parallel between Siddhartha Gautama and the Prophet Muhammad. It's so interesting to draw like that type of parallel between Siddhartha Gautama and like the Prophet Muhammad and stuff like that. It's very interesting to draw like that type of parallel, because you can see them like they do. There's like a similar they are very similar. In my opinion, that's kind of just interesting, because you know, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, aka the Buddha, because you know, the Buddha is like an honorific title, just like Genghis Khan. It's like Khan is like an honorific title. The Buddha like is like an honorific title. I do believe it's like an honorific title. It's not like his actual name. The guy's actual name was Siddhartha Gautama. It's so interesting to me, like, you know, the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and the Prophet Muhammad, they both were like during like during like their lives, they were like on the out, they were like wandering around their society, and then they kind of retreated somewhere, and then they were like deeply meditating, contemplating. And that's so interesting. Both the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and the Prophet Muhammad, they were like so like concerned about their society. They were like thinking about all these important existential issues, and they were like contemplating, meditating, and they both experienced some type of like enlightenment. Obviously the Prophet Muhammad, he believed that he was like contacted by like the supreme creator of this universe and stuff in reality, while the Buddha, he just figured things out for himself. I do believe so. He got some other type of enlightenment. Anyway, back to the Buddha though. But I just want to like kind of spend some amount of time comparing like the Buddha and the Prophet Muhammad, because they're very similar people. They have like a very similar type of lifestyle and stuff. They're like, you can compare them in like so many different types of ways, the Buddha and like the Prophet Muhammad and stuff, Siddhartha Gautama and the Prophet Muhammad and stuff like that. It's kind of like very interesting. I don't know, I just wanted to like kind of draw like that type of parallel. It's kind of very interesting. Anyway, back to Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Anyway, you know, the Buddha, he was like a prince born in like India, somewhere around Nepal. Anyway, and blah, blah. I don't want to keep like going in circles. He was like so privileged and stuff, and he was sheltered away from all like the horrors of his society when he was like very young and stuff. And as he started to get older, he started to like venture out of his comfort zone, and he was like walking around India, and he was like looking at all of these like issues and problems and stuff, and it really like started to like concern him and stuff. And then he like sat, I do believe it was like a lotus tree or something similar, some type of tree, sat down. He was like really thinking, he had like a really good old think about everything and stuff. He was like deeply meditating and contemplating, and he experienced some type of enlightenment. I do believe that this type of enlightenment, that's where the Buddhist religion comes from. That's where Buddhism comes from. When this guy Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he was like contemplating, meditating about all like these types of issues and problems with his like society in India and stuff. And he was like very concerned about like what's going on with his society in India and stuff. And like he was thinking about all the problems that were plaguing his society. He sat down near the lotus tree and was like deeply meditating, contemplating and stuff. And he experienced some type of enlightenment. And that's where Buddhism comes from. Buddhism comes from like Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha's like, he's like Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha's his like this type of like meditation, this type of enlightenment he got when he was like next to a lotus tree, like deeply meditating, contemplating over all of like his society's existential problems and issues. And he got this type of enlightenment, and that's where the Buddhist religion comes from. That's where Buddhism comes from Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha's enlightenment. And basically he figured out that like a lot of like our suffering comes from the fact that we become way too attached to the material world. We become way too attached, we become too materialistic and stuff like that. And this is where all of our suffering comes from. It comes from the fact that we become simply, quite simply, we become way too attached to the material world, and that's where all of our issues come from. And basically, I know there's like a couple other things with Buddhism and stuff. I'm not gonna like I don't believe it's just what I'm saying right now. I do believe there's like a ton of other things. There's like a bunch of other types of things that make like that kind of define Buddhism. But you know, one of the things that defines Buddhism is the fact that like, you know, like, it's kind of like one of like was it like the Four Noble Truths, something similar, like some type of noble truth is that, you know, attachment is kind of like the root cause of all suffering. Attachment, becoming too materialistic, becoming too hedonistic, all these types of things, that's what really causes suffering and stuff like that, and plagues our mind and makes us like not enjoy this life. It's becoming like too materialistic and stuff like that, too hedonistic. That's what really causes like all of our existential issues and stuff. I do believe, obviously there's a couple other types of things, and he talks about like the right way, the right path, and all these types of things. But anyway, but you know, I just want to get back to you. Actually, I don't want to keep like talking about the same things, but you know, Prophet Muhammad and Siddhartha Gautama, it's very interesting that they both experienced some type of enlightenment when they were like deeply meditating, contemplating over their society's problems and stuff. Then that should like kind of like give you like some type of like motivation to meditate. You know, meditation is like so important, because you know, the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he was meditating, he got enlightenment. The Prophet Muhammad and stuff like that, it wasn't like in the cave of Hira, was deeply meditating, contemplating, he got like the divine revelation from Allah. So, you know, meditation is super important. Hopefully that should like inspire you to like take meditation more seriously. But anyway, that's kind of like a little side tangent back to Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. It's so interesting to me, like, you know, Buddhism and stuff. Obviously Buddhism comes from the Buddha, aka Siddhartha Gautama. You know, Buddha, it's not even his actual name, it's like an honor. I do believe it's like an honorific title. You know, it's Genghis Khan, like it's not his real name. Temujin, not Genghis Khan. Khan itself like an honorific title, kind of going in circles. But you know, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, so interesting, his life. Obviously I'm gonna, in the video description comment section, I'll try to find like a better biography to kind of link you to make you watch it, to make you watch something like with more like graphical detail. I'm gonna briefly talk about him in this video. Buddhism is like, in my opinion, obviously there's like some different branches of Buddhism. Some Buddhists I know that Buddhism, some branches of Buddhism might be like getting tangled up like with Hinduism, and so some Buddhists, they might believe in like they might honor and venerate like the Hindu deities. Some of them, I don't know, but Buddhism is like so interesting. In my opinion, I don't believe that Buddhism should even technically be considered like a religion. I do believe it should be seen more as like a philosophy. It's like a very beautiful, interesting philosophy. Attachment and stuff like that. There's like there was like a noble truths and all that type of stuff. I can't like go into like all the nitty-gritty details, because I can only pick things off the top of my head. But you know, Buddhism is like such an interesting religion. World religion. Is it a religion? I don't believe it should even be considered a religion and stuff like that. Because what deity do the Buddhists pray to and stuff? I don't believe they pray to any specific types of deities. I don't believe the Buddhists what do they pray to and stuff like that. What deity do the Buddhists pray to and stuff? I don't believe they pray to any types of deities or gods. What god do the Buddhists worship? It's kind of like in that type of way. I do believe Buddhism shouldn't even be considered a religion. I do believe it should be seen more as like a philosophy. But that's kind of like a big fat side tangent back to like you know, like Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, because you know, Buddha, it's not even actually, it's not his actual name. His name was like Siddhartha Gautama. Guy, he was like a very noble prince. I do believe he was born into nobility. I don't know, like he had like some type of royalty background. I don't know. Born into the top of his society, and he was like deeply meditating, contemplating over all the issues that were plaguing India during his like life. He was looking at like India, he was seeing all these issues and problems, and he's like wondering like where does it all come from and stuff. And you know, and he was like meditating behind a lotus tree, and he got like some type of enlightenment from that. And it's like very interesting. It's so interesting to think about it. The meditation that through like because he was like behind a lotus tree, and he was like deeply meditating, contemplating, and he's like thinking about like where all the issues, like where all the problems are coming from in his society. Look at that beautiful greenery and the sunshine, man, fucking amazing. I'm telling you for sure, if you're like stuck in all day, it's gonna do your head in. I do encourage you like to venture out of your like just like the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he went out of his comfort zone. I do recommend to you guys watching my videos to get out of your comfort zone, to get outside more, get some more sunshine, fresh air. I'm telling you, it's going to do wonders for your mental health, your physical health as well, because you're going to get sunshine on your skin, and you're going to get like vitamin D synthesized and stuff. I'm telling you, it's such a good thing to get some sunshine, y'all. Get some fresh air and stuff. Anyway, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, such an important personality It's world famous, obviously. Again, in the video description comment section, I'm gonna link you like a very good like video on him, something that's gonna be like more graphically detailed and stuff. I'm telling you, the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama, just like the Prophet Muhammad, I just like, it's so interesting to me, like both the Prophet Muhammad and Buddha Siddhartha Gautama, they were both kind of like born into like a very privileged position. I know Muhammad was like a part of the Quraysh tribe, like a very important tribe in Arabia, and like Siddhartha Gautama, he was like a part of like some type of Shakya clan. He was like a part of like some other type of like important tribe and clan, and they were both at the top of their society, and they had like but at some point in their lives they just start to like venture out, escape their comfort zone. They start like to retreat somewhere, and they start to like very deeply contemplate and meditate. And that's so interesting, this time of parallel between Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and the Prophet Muhammad. A lot of people don't really compare these two people, these very important like historical personalities. A lot of people don't like compare them at all. I do believe that that's kind of like kind of dumb to me. I do believe that these two people in our history, they're like the very influential people from our history, they should be like compared, and like kind of draw like, you should draw like a parallel between these very important people in our history and past. But you know, like anyway, Siddhartha Gautama, again, a guy, you know, Siddhartha Gautama is got this the Buddhism comes from the Buddha, aka Siddhartha Gautama. The Buddha, again, it's like it's not even his actual name, it's like an honorific title. I do believe so. Obviously I might be a little bit wrong, I might get a lot of things wrong in this video. That's why I'm gonna like definitely for sure in the video description comment section link you like a better like type of biography with more graphical detail and designs. I just really want to like give you like my own opinions on like Buddhism and the Buddha and Siddhartha Gautama. I do believe he's like such an interesting guy. He did like the noble truths and all that type of stuff, Buddhism and all that type of stuff. I'm just gonna like, in my opinion, the Buddhists, I know like there's the Buddhists, they believe in a lot of different types of things, but I do believe that one of the types of things they believe in is like attachment, basically suffering and all this like misery that the human being gets is like from becoming way too attached to the materialistic world. We human beings, we become way too materialistic and stuff, and that's where all our suffering comes from, and that's why a lot of us become so depressed and miserable, because we become way too materialistic and attached to the material world, and we become way too attached, and inevitably we don't realize that we're going to all turn old and die and stuff, and we're going to leave this material world. And that's what the Buddhists kind of believe as well. They sort of believe that you got to just sort of detach, become more detached, let go of like all the material world, get rid of like all your like materialistic desires and stuff, and you'll be a lot better off. I do believe in that as well to some extent. Like, okay, well, let's talk about like my opinions on Buddhism and Siddhartha Gautama and the Buddha. I do believe in like a lot of like the Buddhist doctrine. Like I do believe in like in some like parts of Buddhism, like essentially like becoming materialistic, becoming way too attached to the materialistic world, that will like destroy your mentality, that'll ruin your mental health. It'll give you like these types of very like agonizing issues, pains in your psyche and stuff, because you know the material world and stuff, we're all just going to turn old and die. It doesn't matter like what you do, you're going to turn old and die and stuff, and you're going to leave this material world. And it doesn't matter how much money you make, what you get in your life, like all the luxuries and stuff like that. It doesn't matter what happens to you and stuff. Well, it doesn't matter like what you get and stuff, all that type of materialistic stuff. It doesn't matter how accomplished you are or whatever, you're going to turn old and you're going to die, and you're going to leave this world, and all those accomplishments are going to disappear. Fucking hell, I knew it. I knew the fucking camera's gonna get too hot. It's gonna turn off. Anyway, Buddhism, a little bit about what Buddhism's about is like basically becoming materialistic. Materialism is kind of like the cause of all our problems and suffering. And yeah, my GoPro Hero 9 got too hot. I knew it, because it's fucking sunny outside, man. Why does it fucking have to be sunny? Actually, that's not really that bad. I just wish these GoPros, man, they weren't so shitty. They didn't just get too, overheating wasn't like a big issue for these GoPro Hero 9s and other types of GoPros anyway. Like Buddhism, sort of like what Buddhism's sort of about, it's like basically materialism and all that type of stuff. That's what's gonna really cause you a lot of pain and problems and stuff, and suffering and issues like that. Becoming way too materialistic, becoming too attached to the materialistic world, that's what's gonna really cause you all these like issues and problems and stuff like that. Becoming way too materialistic, becoming like way too concerned about like the material world, that's what's really going to cause you all of these types of existential problems and like other types of problems and stuff. That's what the Buddhists sort of believe. They sort of believe that basically becoming too attached. Oh yo, if the camera turns off again, I'm just gonna have to finish this video inside, not outside. Anyway, you know, like the Buddhism and stuff like that, the Buddhists, they basically believe that basically becoming too attached, that's like the kind of like the issue. That's like the big issue for us human beings, that we become way too attached. Maybe I should like get into like the shade. Shit. Maybe I should get into like the shade. Keep the camera cool. Shit, there we are. Buddhism, basically Buddhism, it's sort of like it's about like the fact that us human beings, we become way too attached to the material world, and that's where we get all of our suffering from. That's where all our problems come from and stuff. And basically, it's like that's kind of like a big fat issue and problem, that we become way too attached with the material world and stuff. And that's why we have all these like problems. That's why we get where all our suffering comes from and all that type of stuff. Yeah, definitely should stay in the shades. Hopefully the camera stays cool now. Blow on it some, give it like some cooling down. Anyway, yeah, us human beings, we we become way too materialistic. We get too attached to the material world, and because that becomes depressing, because you know, like, well, because the reality is that it doesn't matter like what you do in this like material world, like we're all just gonna turn old and die and stuff. That's kind of like very tragic and sad. Damn. Maybe the wind's like, hopefully it cools the camera down, the wind, man. That's the issue with these GoPros, man. I swear I might need to get some other type of camera. These GoPros, they get so hot so quickly, and the camera just fucking overheats all the time, and it's so irritating and annoying. But anyway, yeah, anyway, Buddhism comes from the Buddha, aka Siddhartha Gautama, and that's so interesting. Look at the blue sky, man. I see a plane as well in the sky. Shit. I remember when I was like a lot younger, I used to watch anime and stuff, some cartoons. Oh, yo, the camera turned off, yo. It got too hot and it turned off, and the battery was kind of getting too low. The GoPro Hero 9 battery was getting too low, so I'm just gonna finish this video off in my fucking room. I probably should lie down by the bed. Fucking hell, you see that sunshine. Anyway, Buddhism is so interesting. Maybe I should be somewhere more interesting, I don't know. Fucking my room. I wish I could finish this video off outside. Maybe I should have just went back out and finished it off outside, I don't know. Should I do that? Nah, it's probably gonna get there's too much sunshine, it's probably gonna get overheated again, the camera. But you know, Buddhism is like such an interesting religion. It shouldn't even be considered a religion. It should be considered like a philosophy. In my opinion, I don't believe Buddhism should be even considered like a religion. It should be considered like a philosophy, because Buddhism, the Buddha, like, he didn't pray to any specific type of deity. The Buddhists, what type of God do they worship? They don't really worship any specific God. They don't really pray to any specific deity. So I believe that the Buddhists, Buddhism should not even be considered a religion. That's so interesting to me. Buddhism is such an interesting religion. You see outside. There we go. I have to finish this video off in my room, man. I know for sure if I went back outside and I tried filming this video outside, the camera's gonna overheat, and it's gonna be everything's gonna get fucked up. Shit. Anyway, Buddhism comes from Buddha, aka Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama was quite legendary indeed. He was like quite a intellectual guy. Not intellectual. Was he intellectual? I don't know if he was like necessarily intellectual, but he was like quite mentally like enlightened. He was like a very enlightened person. He's such an interesting personality, a historical personality. In regards to like history, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, is so interesting to study about him and his life, especially his enlightenment. And earlier I mentioned the fact that you can create like this parallel between like the Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and aka the Prophet Muhammad and stuff. I don't know, like Muhammad, yeah, the Prophet Muhammad, he probably has like a more like full Arabic name, but I don't want to like waste time on that right now. But you know, both like the Siddhartha Gautama and the Prophet Muhammad, both of these guys, look at that, man. Sonic Hedgehog figures. Now I can't mess with those right now. Yeah, man, I wish I could finish this video off outside. I know the camera's just gonna get overheated again because of the sunshine. Anyway, but you know, back to Buddhism. Buddhism comes from the Buddha, aka Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama, such an interesting guy in terms of like history, such an interesting personality. His life and all of that type of stuff is so like interesting, so important that you study like the life of Siddhartha Gautama. You carefully like analyze his life and see what, and come to know like what happened to this guy called Siddhartha Gautama, what happened to him, what his life was about, what was going on in his life and stuff. He's so important. Again, in the video description comment section, I'll link you like a biography of this guy. It's so important that you carefully kind of like you study like this guy Siddhartha Gautama. You carefully study his life. You go through all of like the important information regarding him and stuff like that. It's very important indeed. It's so interesting, his life and what happened to him and all that type of stuff. Again, earlier I mentioned I create like this type of parallel between Siddhartha Gautama, aka the Buddha, aka Siddhartha Gautama, and like the Prophet Muhammad. And that's so interesting because both of these guys, they were like deeply concerned about their society and their civilization and the people. Their people and stuff like that. And they were like, they retreated somewhere and they were deeply meditating and contemplating. It's so interesting. And it's so interesting, like Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, aka, he was deeply meditating, contemplating and stuff like that. He was trying to work out like where all of these like issues in his society were coming from and stuff. And it's so interesting, the guy. And he came to like this type of realization, this great realization, basically, that basically suffering and like misery and all that type of stuff. It basically is like the result of us human beings, and we simply become way too attached to the material world. We care about like things like, we care about like vanity and all that kind of stuff. Look at this PS5 I got here, man. Look at this PS5, man. Yo, look at this PS5, man. Yo. Stuff like this. We care too much about like vanity and we care too much about materialism and all these types of things. Look at the PS5 I got here, man. Look at this. That. And I got this there. We care about vanity and all these types of things. We care quite frankly, we care too much about like these types of superficial things. Like the PS5, and they've got the games and all that type of these very materialistic things. We care way too much about these types of things. And the reality is that we're all going to turn old, and we're all going to grow old, and we're going to die, and we're going to leave this planet, and all these types of materialistic things are not going to come with us. And when we like enter into like the afterlife, if there is an afterlife, or we might just go into the abyss, who knows. Buddhism, in my opinion, is so like important to carefully study this type of it's not really, I wouldn't even consider Buddhism really a religion. Is Buddhism like a religion? I don't think so, in my opinion. I'll give you like a very good like reason, because Buddhism, what God do the Buddhists pray to? Again, I mentioned this way earlier, I'm kind of going in circles, I don't know. But what God do the Buddhists pray to? They don't pray to any specific deity. They don't pray to any specific deity or God or anything similar to that. So in my opinion, I don't believe that Buddhism should even really be considered a religion. Obviously, that's all like subjective and opinions, and you might have your own opinions on that and stuff like that, I don't know. Buddhism is like so important to carefully study about and to carefully look into and stuff like that, and to kind of research about this very important these type of, like Buddhism is sort of like is like a type of spiritual or religious traditions that came out of Nepal, India and stuff like that, because the Buddha, he was kind of born from there. It's very important indeed to study like Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths. Let me kind of, because I'm inside now, I can kind of like double check on those. Got my tablet here. You know, Buddhism, I'll just keep mumbling on about it though. It's so interesting, Buddhism. So fucking interesting. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, just like the Prophet Muhammad, he was looking at all of these issues in his society, and he was just like contemplating, meditating, and he got like this type of enlightenment. And it's so interesting, his life. What happened to the Buddha, his whole life story is so interesting. His whole life story is so interesting. It's very, very interesting, man. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Very, very interesting. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, is such an interesting guy. His life story, such an interesting personality. Again, just like the Prophet Muhammad, because again, I know I'm going in fucking circles, but it's so important to create like a parallel between like the Prophet Muhammad and Siddhartha Gautama, because a lot of people, they see Muhammad like as a totally violent person. Muhammad was like a warlord, even though in my opinion Muhammad was very, very similar to Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. I do believe that the Prophet Muhammad was similar to Siddhartha Gautama and the Buddha. Both Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and Prophet Muhammad, they were both meditating and contemplating about like all of their society's problems and issues. That's so interesting, isn't it? This type of parallel that I can quickly make. Buddha, let me double check on this. Noble. Let me just double check on this shit. Noble Truths. Yeah, it is the Four Noble Truths. I got it right. I was so worried I might have fucked up on that, but it's like Four Noble Truths. In Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths are the truths of the Noble Ones, the truth. truths are dukkha is an innate. Let me double check on this. The Four Noble Truths. That's like what Buddhism is about. I can actually check on it right now with a tablet. I'll just quickly. What are the Four Noble Truths for Buddhism? One of the Four Noble Truths. One of them is like dukkha, literally suffering here. Unsatisfactoriness is an innate characteristic of existence in the realm of samsara. So dukkha, one of the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism is dukkha. Dukkha, literally suffering here, unsatisfactoriness is an innate characteristic of existence in the realm of samsara. So dukkha, basically suffering. We are naturally, like, we suffer because we are always unsatisfied with our life and our existence and stuff like that. Another like Four Noble Truth, another like one would be like samudaya, origin, arising, combination, cause. Dukkha arises or continues with tanha, craving, desire, or attachment, thirst. While tanha is traditionally interpreted in Western languages as the cause of dukkha, tanha can also be seen as the factor tying us to dukkha, or as a response to dukkha, trying to escape it. And another third one would be a nirodha. I'm probably butchering these names. Nirodha, cessation, ending, confinement. Dukkha can be ended or contained by the renouncement of or letting go of this tanha. The confinement of tanha releases the excessive bind of dukkha. Marga, the final fourth noble half, marga path, noble eightfold path, is the path leading to the confinement of tanha and dukkha. I butchered it. It's kind of like Buddhism's like very it's very difficult to kind of like to quickly to look into it and stuff, and to research about it, and to kind of study a lot of the etymology, word etymologies and stuff like that. But again, in my opinion, Buddhism is basically about like letting go of the material world, to not become so materialistic and attached to all of like these physical material things are in this world. Because what's very important to understand is even though that we're as human beings, we live for like quite a while. We do live for like a little bit. We live a little bit longer than, let's say, like, you know, dogs. They only live for around a decade. Dogs 12 years. Dogs, cats, most animals live for around a decade, and then they start to like turn old and die. Us human beings, we live for like potentially until like 60 years, and then some people might make it to 70, and some people might make it to 80. For the most part, though, as human beings, we're only here for like, we might live longer than a lot of these other types of animals, but we're still going to turn old and die. And that's why you should not become so physically attached, so materialistically attached to this world, to this world and stuff like that. Buddhism, man, if you're a Muslim person, you should look, because the Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, is just like, there's like, you can create like a massive parallel between Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and the Prophet Muhammad in regards to like the fact that, you know, like the Prophet Muhammad, he was like born into his society. He was like a privileged person. He was like he was a part of the Quraysh tribe, and he was like at the top of like the Arab society and stuff, and he was looking at his like this type of the Arab society, and so he's seeing all these types of issues and problems, and he was like, and then he inevitably, like when he was like 40ish, he went to the cave of Hira, and he was like, he kind of retreated away from his society, and he was like kind of meditating, contemplating, figuring out like where all these issues are coming from in his society, just like that. But in that same type of way, you know, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he was sort of like that as well. He was born into India, though not in Arabia like Prophet Muhammad, in India and some Nepal, and he was like looking at all these issues in his society, because, you know, the Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he was like kind of, again, born into royalty. I do believe so. Let me just double check on that. Buddha royalty. Let me just royalty. Let me double check on that. But yeah. The Buddha was born into a noble family in Lumbini in 563 BCE as per historical events. It was called Siddhartha Gautama. Yeah, he was born as Prince Siddhartha. So yeah, he was a prince. He was like born into royalty, just like the Prophet Muhammad in the Quraysh tribe. He was like at the top of the Arab society. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, was like at the top of Indian society and stuff, and he was like a very noble, rich person. And both Prophet Muhammad and Siddhartha Gautama, both of these guys, they were like deeply concerned about their society. And when they were like turning older, they started to retreat away, and they were starting to like deeply meditate and contemplate and stuff, and to try and like to discover like where all the ills and like the problems in their society came from. And everybody, they experienced some type of enlightenment, and they figured out that it's all coming out of, it all comes from like the fucking materialistic world. I don't believe that Prophet Muhammad, obviously Islam, Allah contacted him. If you're a Muslim person, that's what you're going to believe. With Siddhartha Gautama, he got like some type of revelation, not revelation, but enlightenment from his own meditation and stuff, I don't know. But they were both these guys. So I know I'm going in circles, I know I'm kind of repeating myself. It's so interesting to create like this parallel between them, because a lot of people they would never ever even assume of like comparing the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, with the Prophet Muhammad. It's kind of very interesting. That's why I'm doing it in this video. It's kind of like, it is very interesting to compare these two very important historical people, historical personalities. But you know, Siddhartha Gautama, aka the Buddha, man, he was like such a interesting guy. Buddhism is kind of like, especially if you're like from like some type of Western country, it is kind of like very satirized. It is very satirized. I don't know how to exactly term that. It's like very dumbed down, if you know what I mean. It's like very dumb and down. A lot of people, they kind of like they look at Buddhism and stuff like that. They get like the wrong understandings and interpretations of it. They just see it as like some type of hippie thing. You have to become a hippie if you want to be a Buddhist. You need to be like a hippie. You need to dress in like very loose clothing and stuff. You need to like wear makeup and stuff, draw stuff on your face, and you get all these tattoos on your body and stuff. You have to become a hippie. I do believe that, especially in the West, especially if you're from America or from Germany or Europe or England, which is where I am right now. If you're from like these types of countries, the Western world, if you are from like these types of Western countries, you're gonna look at Buddhism and you're gonna have like some interpretation, stereotype. Oh, Buddhism, are you a hippie? You're gonna have like this type of interpretation of Buddhism that is like a hippie, like religion is a religion sort of like for hippies. Buddhism, you're gonna tell me to like wear loose clothes and to like have tattoos on my body and to like put makeup on and all this weird stuff. Buddhism in the Western world has been heavily, like, I do believe it's been corrupted. It's been dumbed down. It's been kind of like very turned into like some type of comedy. Oh shoot, I gotta like stand up, look outside. Damn. Buddhism, especially in the Western world, has been kind of like very badly and misrepresented and dumbed down and kind of turned into like some type of weird cult. It sort of is like a weird cult, especially in the Western world. Even though Buddhism, like the Buddha didn't really tell you to like follow specific people. It's kind of, I don't know. Even like, what am I telling you that you need to go to India and to like listen to like what Indian people tell you? No, Buddhism, I do believe that you should do your own careful research. I don't believe that. Don't like, because especially in the Western world, Buddhism is kind of like, it has been like sort of like dumbed down and corrupted and kind of like turned into something very stupid. I do believe like hippies and all that type of stuff. People like, when I say Buddhism, you gotta kind of think about, you gotta have like this type of weird, like especially in the West, this type of hippie conceptualizations. This idea that Buddhism translates to you being a hippie. You have to like turn into a hippie. You have to like wear loose clothing, have tattoos on your body. You have to be a vegetarian, a vegan, which is kind of very dumb. Even though, you know, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, I do believe he consumed milk. I do believe he consumed some animal products and stuff. You know, all these like fucking stupid misconceptions about Buddhism, this misinterpretation, this fucking horrible like misunderstanding, mischaracterization of Buddhism. That Buddhism, you have to be a hippie if you want to be a Buddhist. Like Buddhism's for hippies or some stupid shit like this. And just because of the fact that, you know, like the Western world is heavily like, it's completely like tainted, like the more like pristine like image of Buddhism. The Western world's completely corrupted, like this type of like a more like understanding of like more like important understanding of Buddhism. The Western world, the West has completely like misrepresented Buddhism and completely like tainted it and dumbed it down and made it very stupid and like butchered it completely. Buddhism, like, because when I say Buddhism, a lot of you gotta like have these understandings of Buddhism, like oh, you need to be a hippie, you need to wear like loose clothing, and you need to like have tattoos, and you need to be a vegan, a vegetarian, and that's what Buddhism's about. Yeah, Buddhism's about veganism and vegetarianism, and you have to wear loose clothing and all that dumb shit. Even though, you know, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he consumed animal products. I do believe so. So all of like these fucking Buddhism in the West has been so fucked up, man. It's been butchered. Buddhism in the West has been so fucking butchered and fucking turned into like some type of comedic joke. Buddhism has turned it literally into like a comedic joke. Buddhism has been fucking butchered to pieces. Yeah, because especially if you're from the Western world, you're gonna have like all these misconceptions about Buddhism. That, oh, to be a Buddhist, you have to be like a vegan, you have to be a vegetarian, you have to care about like all these like issues, environmental issues. You have to be like a hippie person. You have to wear loose clothing. You have to have tattoos on your hands and body. All these fucking horrible misconceptions about Buddhism. Even though the Buddha, he was like, he consumed animal products. He was like he wasn't like, you would not see him like as a hippie. I do believe so. Obviously, he was like kind of like wearing like some loose clothing, and he was like kind of meditating, stuff like that. But he wasn't like a full-on hippie, like especially from like North America or something similar to that. There was like so many misconceptions about Buddhism. Buddhism's been fucking very dumbed down and kind of mischaracterized and kind of like butchered. I'm telling you for sure. I do like encourage you to at least attempt to like read like some of the like original like Buddhist texts, like the Pali Canon. Let me double check on that. Buddha Pali Canon. I just want to check on Pali Canon. The Pali Canon. Yeah, there we go. Pali Canon is the standard collection of scriptures in the Theravada Buddhist tradition as preserved in the Pali language. It is the most complete extant early Buddhist canon. It derives mainly from the Dhamsutra school. Get like a good translation of the Pali Canon and read that for yourself. don't buy into like these fucking retarded like Western because in the West, Buddhism's been so fucking mischaracterized, badly dumbed down, and misrepresented. Buddhism, like now, if I say Buddhism and stuff like that, and the Buddha, you're gonna like have like this interpretation of Buddhism that you have to be a hippie, you have to wear loose clothing, you have to have like tattoos on your face, you have to be like sort of like caring about animals and all this type of dumb shit. Even though the Buddha, he consumed animal products. I do know that for sure. He like consumed milk at least. I know some like lady offered him like milk and rice. I don't know if necessarily, I might have to double check on that, but you know, the Buddha and Buddhism's been so, Siddhartha Gautama has been fucking just like the Prophet Muhammad, just like Islam, Buddhism as well, especially in the Western world, has been so like butchered, mischaracterized, heavily like misrepresented, taken out of context, kind of tainted and ruined because of like all of these, like because of Western, like all of the pop media, all the media and stuff like that, all the culture, the cartoons and the movies and the shows. It's kind of very heavily like tainted Buddhism, the pure original doctrine of Buddhism. I encourage you, if you were to like at least even give two fucks about Buddhism, if you want to like look into like Buddhism, I encourage you to get like the original like texts and scriptures and to kind of read through all of that yourself on your own terms. Don't like look at like all the like, don't like just like watch like a couple movies, watch some cartoons about Buddhism and some dumb shit. Like you watch The Simpsons and like Buddhism like kind of briefly mentioned there and stuff. Buddhism has been so heavily corrupted, degraded, like rubbed, like put through the mud, and it's so horrible to me to see like Buddhism. Just like Islam, just like this is why I like comparing like the Prophet Muhammad. This is why I like creating a parallel between like Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and the Prophet Muhammad. Because just like the Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, just like Buddhism has been like, just how Buddhism's been heavily like butchered in the West. Just like how Buddhism has been butchered, even Islam has been butchered. Islam has been mischaracterized, misconstrued, taken out of context, kind of like have badly stereotyped, and just like that, just like how Buddhism's been badly like stereotyped and misconstrued and mischaracterized. Likewise, Islam has also suffered like the same issues and stuff. But you know, Buddhism, in my opinion, I don't believe Buddhism should even be considered like a proper like religion. It really is more like a philosophy, and I do encourage you to study Buddhism. Go through like look up the Pali canon, Pali, Pali, and canon, Canon, Pali canon. Research about that, and I would also encourage you to like to buy like some good translations of those, like the original Buddhist scriptures, the Pali canon. I know there might be a couple other things. Do your own research. I don't want to spoon feed you everything. Buddhism's like such a beautiful. I do see it more as a philosophy, because what God do the Buddhists pray to? They don't really pray to any specific deities, do they? Do they? I don't believe so. They don't pray to any specific deities. I don't want this video to be too long, and that's about it. Buddhism is like such an interesting philosophy, in my opinion, although you can see it as like a religion, maybe. I don't know, it's all subjective in that type of way. But anyway, I don't want this video to be too long, and that's about it.